For the astute among you, you may have noticed that things have changed, ever so slightly. And the reason things have changed this morning, the reason I've jiggled things around, is because this morning we come in, if you hadn't guessed already, to talk about the heart of worship. And so I thought it would be a massively missed opportunity if I came and spoke about the heart of worship after we did our worship time. So we've changed things around this morning, so we're going to talk about worship this morning, and then we're going to go into worship. Hooray! Glad you're excited. So as we think about the heart of worship, as we think about worship and all that kind of stuff, I think the obvious question is then, well, what is worship? And so as I've been looking and praying and studying and thinking about what worship is, I came up with a little sentence that I'm going to share with you, and I propose to you this morning that this is what worship is. And so worship is a personal expression of adoration for a holy God. Worship is a personal expression of adoration for a holy God. That's what worship is. So is worship singing? Well, singing is part of worship, but worship can't be singing alone, because what if I can't sing? And I don't mean like what if I sound bad when I sing. That's not what I'm talking about, right? It's not like if I'm not Pavarotti, is that worship? I'm saying like if I've got like laryngitis and like nothing comes out, then I can't worship if worship is just singing, right? It is worship being down the front and being all hyped up and hands in the air and yay, Jesus! But if that's worship, what if I've got no arms? Because I can't lift up holy hands if I've got no arms. So if that's worship, then I can't worship. So if it's not singing, and if it's not being all like, yay, down the front, that's it. Is it then being still? The Bible says, be still and know that I am God. Is it being still? Because anyone can be still. But what if I've got a tremor? And I can't be still. What if I physically have a condition or a disease where my entire body shakes all the time and I can't be still? That means I can't worship. So worship has got to be more than those things, haven't it? So the question is this morning, what is worship? So we're going to look at 4 things this morning that I think that we need to consider and think about and ask ourselves when we come to worship. And the first thing that, probably one of the most important things is when we come to worship, is to ask the question, well, who are we worshipping? Because you need to know who you're worshipping if you're worshipping someone, right? So, in the spirit of changing things around, and in the spirit of Dale's often quote of sometimes it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. This is the bit he didn't know that was coming, and also the bit that none of you knew was coming. I'm going to get some audience participation this morning. This is where you all get really afraid. Because our view of God this morning will affect how we worship God this morning. If you have a vast and intimate view of God this morning, then your worship will be vast and intimate. It'll be amazing. It'll be the best thing you've ever experienced. But if your view of God this morning is small and casual, then your worship is going to be small and casual. It'll be something that you kind of just turn up and do. Happy days, let's go home, have a chicken dinner and watch Netflix or whatever it is you people do on a Sunday afternoon. That's what we do. I'm assuming not all of you watch Netflix, but that's what we do. Your view of God this morning. So in the interest of fun and just changing things around a little bit, just for a couple of seconds, just call out to me, who is God?
The Almighty.
He's the Almighty. Thank you, Graham. He's love. He's the Father. Yeah. If you've got more than one, just keep going. Just keep going. Just shout them out.
Everlasting God.
Yeah.
No other.
Full of grace and truth.
Yeah. Forgive it.
Kindness.
Yeah.
Best of all, He's alive.
Oh, look at Graham. Do you want to come preach?
He's a brown boy.
We'll swap, shall we? He wants a gold star. I tell you what, you can have a crown when you get to heaven, huh? Awesome. Yeah, he's all those things. So I wrote a list because I'm a great believer in if I'm going to ask you to do something, I should probably do it myself. Because what will happen is if I don't prepare myself, someone will be like, well, what do you think he is? And I'd be like, So I made a little list. And by little list, I mean an A4 sheet of paper. Without Googling, without going anywhere else, or just things in my mind that at the moment came to me of who God is. So I'm going to ask you, if you want to get excited this morning, get excited because this is exciting stuff. All right? So who is God this morning? Who do we worship? Well, as some people said, God is Father. He is Son. He is Holy Spirit. He is King. He is Lord. He is Saviour. He is friend. He is brother. He is mighty. He is all-powerful. He is all-knowing. He is ever-present. He is my refuge, my fortress, my strong tower. He is my deliverer, my comfort, my healer, my protector, my counselor. He is good. He is kind. He is gracious. He is forgiving. He is merciful. He is loving. He is the light of the world. He is the way, the truth, and the life, the Alpha and the Omega. He is the victor. He is the good shepherd. He is the door. He is the gate. He is the bread of life. Take a breath. He is holy. He is glorious. He is splendid. He is unstoppable, incredible. He is awesome. He is infallible. He is never-ending. He is love. He is caring. He is untamable. He is the Lion of Judah and the Lamb that was slain. He is the promised one, the conqueror, the interceder, the provider, the great physician. He is the truth. He is the Prince of Peace. He is patient. He is never changing. He makes us holy. He gives us power. He is the servant king. He adopts us. He seals us with his guarantee. He gives us a family. He gives us a purpose. He gives us rest. He watches over us. He even sings songs over us. He restores us. He's our defender, our champion, our leader, our redeemer. He is worthy of praise. He is worthy of worship. He is worthy of adoration. And this morning, he is our God.
Amen.
I'm glad you clapped. I didn't have to read that out again. I'm sweating just reading that bit. That's who we worship this morning. And that's not even everything that he is. That's just the stuff that I could remember to write down. That's who God is this morning. When we come to worship, we need to understand who we worship. And that's who we worship this morning. And he is an amazing, amazing God. Second thing we need to understand about worship is that worship is not about me. Worship is not about me. Worship is not about you. Worship is not about anybody else in the room. Because worship is an offering. Worship is not something that you receive. It's something that you give. There's a saying that says you only get out of something what you put into something. And as I was prepping and stuff, I was thinking about this saying, and it was coming to mind, and I don't know if it needs to apply to worship. Because when we apply that saying to worship, the question is then, well, what did I get out of worship? And I don't think that's the right question for worship. That should never be the question for worship. The correct question when we worship is, was my offering acceptable to a holy God? If you have a Bible this morning. We're going to jump to Genesis chapter 4. Dale has left his Bible up here. To these pastors, I can't do anything with them, can I? Any opportunity to rebuke is fine. We're going to Genesis chapter 4. And we're reading verses 3 to verse 7. Or the end of verse 2 really to verse 7. Where is it? And it says this. Now Abel kept flocks, and Cain worked the soil. In the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. And Abel also brought an offering, fat portions, from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favour on Abel and his offering. But on Cain and his offering he did not look with favour. So Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. You got the story of these two brothers, Cain and Abel, and they both bring an offering to God. It's offering season or time or whatever, okay? And Abel goes away and he's like, right, I'm going to get the best of what I've got, and I'm going to do it right, and I'm going to offer it to God because God deserves my best. And Cain is coming up to offering season as well, and he's like, right, okay, awesome. Well, I could maybe trade some fruit with my brother and get some good stuff of him. I could do this, but do you know what? Actually, I got some good fruit beer. I got this nice basket of Granny Smith apples, or Caden Smith apples, because Granny Smith wasn't around then. I don't know. It's like, but that'll do. We'll give those to God. God will be happy with that. That'll be fine. The difference between Cain and Abel beer is that Cain brings a half-hearted offering. He brings something because he knows he has to bring something, but it's not maybe the best of what he's got. It's not the right thing that he needs to bring. And so God doesn't look on favour with Cain's offering. And he's like, well, Cain, why are you so upset? Because Cain has come, and I'm going to give you a bit of liberty here. I'm going to jiggle some things around to modernise it for us a little bit. Okay, Cain has come to worship. Cain's come, and Cain has come with half-hearted worship. And he's come, and he's walking out to the service. Oh, the preach was good, but I didn't get much out of worship. Well, that was annoying. I didn't really get much out of that at all. What was the point of me even showing up? And God is like, what are you angry about? Well, why are you so upset that you got nothing out of worship? And Cain's like, well, because I expected to get something. And God's like, well, if you come to worship and you understand who I am, then you've done what is right. And you won't be angry. And you won't be downcast. But you brought me half-hearted worship. You brought me something that you felt that you kind of had to do because it's something you do on a Sunday. Or it's something you do as a ritual on a Monday morning. You get up and sing a couple of songs and you go off to work. Or whatever it is. You brought me half-hearted offerings. And God says, I'm not happy with that. And the danger in half-hearted offerings and half-hearted worship for us this morning is that God says when we present an offering of half-heartedness, then it opens the door to sin. Because the reality is if we can't be bothered to bring God our best, then we're not really being bothered with God. Which means we've taken our eyes off who he is. And we said earlier on that the most important thing about worship is knowing who God is. So if we take our eyes off God, then we're opening up the door to a multitude of things like pride and selfishness and bitterness. And, well, I didn't get what I wanted out of worship this morning, I'm not going there again. Well, nothing to do with that. Worship may be amazing, but you weren't focused on God. So there was no favour. Alright, so we're at this point, this danger point. We're at the point where we need to know who God is, and we need to understand that worship is an offering to God. It's something we present to God. So how do we then present an acceptable offering of worship to God? If only God had told us. If only he had written something down some way to explain. Oh wait, hang on. As if by magic. Look at that, it's right here. So, we're going to jump. If you've got a Bible and you want to follow, you want to jump to John chapter 4, because apparently chapter 4 is the place to be this morning. We're going to John chapter 4, and Jesus is talking to the woman at Samaria, and they're having this debate, and he's talking. We're going to start from verse 19, and we're going down to verse 24, but the key verses I really want us to focus on for a minute are 23 and 24, okay? But we're going to start at verse 19. Sir, the woman said, I can see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain. But you Jews claim that the place we must worship is in Jerusalem. Woman, Jesus replied, believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is of the Jews. Yet, a time is coming and has now come, and just to put a little pin in there for a second, understand that when Jesus says that time has now come, we are still living in that time. That time still applies now. Okay? Yet a time is coming and has now come when true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For they are the kind of worshippers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshippers must worship in spirit and in truth. So how do we bring an acceptable offering of worship to our holy God this morning? Well, Jesus tells us. He tells us two things. And the first thing he tells us is we must worship him in spirit. Now, we'll do a bit of history now, okay? It's like school, it's great. In the Old Testament times, worship was a very physical thing. Okay? It was something that you would do and everyone would see you doing it and you'd be like, oh, that's their act of worship. It was a very physical thing. There were festivals and there were rituals and there were rules and there were regulations and it were messy sometimes, and sometimes it was full of food, and sometimes it was not full of food at all, and sometimes it was sackcloth and ashes. There was a whole bunch of stuff going on. Alright? But it was very physical. If you were part of a particular festival, you would do a particular thing, and it was almost like, and not that I want to downgrade it at all because it was still worship, but it was almost like a checkbox thing. You do this in this order, this way, this time, boom, worship, yay! Okay? Because you as a person didn't have access to God in the way that we have access to God now. Okay? But we're going to go into that in a second. So at this point when Jesus is speaking, that stuff is still going on. Okay? And the biggest one of all, and if you've ever heard me preach at all, I'll get it in every single time almost. The biggest one of all was this one sacrifice a year. Okay, where you'd go to the temple and the high priest would put on his best robes and his best sashes and all his cool gear, his real good health and safety work gear, right? His hard hat, and they'd get these bulls and these goats and they'd sacrifice them in a particular way, and then they'd drain the blood, and then they'd get this bowl and they'd mix it with some stuff in a bowl, and then they'd get these branches and stuff, and then they'd go into the temple. At the back of the temple was this big room called the Holy of Holies, and in front of the Holy of Holies was this massive curtain, okay? And behind the curtain was the Ark of the Covenant. Now, if you want to know more about the Ark of the Covenant, ask any of the Kids Club leaders after Easter, because we're doing a 4-part series on the Ark of the Covenant, because we are very deep theological estate kids. If you believe that, you'll believe anything. Alright. So there was the Ark of the Covenant, okay? And you couldn't look at the Ark of the Covenant because that is where the presence of God rested, okay? You couldn't go in there at all. In fact, only one person could go in, and only once a year, and that was the high priest. And they were so afraid of going in that when he went in, even only once a year, they'd tie a bit of rope around him just in case he went in, did something wrong and died. Because you can't go in and get him if he's dead, because you can't go in. So they had a bit of rope, so if he died, they just pull him out. We're like, new high priest. Okay, let the voting begin. And that's how we would go, okay? And they'd go in and get this bowl, and they'd mix it all up, and they'd sprinkle this blood over the Ark of the Covenant. And what that would do for 1 year, and 1 year only, is it would cover the sins of the high priest and all the people of Israel. For 1 year. Okay? That's what it would do. It was a very physical thing of worship. You could see it, know what had happened, and be like, worship, awesome. Okay? Jesus here now makes this distinction between the physical and the spiritual. Jesus is saying, no other things that we do with the goats and the bulls and we sacrifice and the high priest, and that's all going to go away. And we're not going to read it now, but in Hebrews 9, the writer talks about the comparison between the earthly temple and like a spiritual temple. And what he says is what Jesus does when Jesus goes to the cross, and when we celebrate Easter in a couple of weeks, he goes to the cross and he goes to the spiritual temple and he pays, I don't know how it works because I'm not God, so don't even ask me about that one, okay? But he pays for the sin of everybody who asks him to take away their sin. That's what he does. And what Jesus is saying is, because I did that in the spirit realm, your worship is no longer physical. Because it has nothing to do with anything that's being created anymore. It's now to do with your spirit and the spiritual realm where God is. You don't need to bring goats and bulls and get dressed up to the nines in robes with tassels and all that kind of stuff anymore, because it's pointless now. What I've done not only covers you for a year, but will cover you for eternity. I don't know if you've noticed, but eternity doesn't ever stop. It lasts a very long time. Because we do it in spirit. It's not a physical thing anymore. And you're sitting there and you're like, all right, cool. The thing is, we're not Jews. So even if we were around in those times, we wouldn't have done all that stuff because we weren't Jews. So we wouldn't have brought goats and bulls and sacrifice and all that kind of stuff. So what are you going, why does that apply to me now? Let's see, Jesus says that kind of physical sacrifice and that kind of physical worship is now pointless because he's done all the work for us. So can I present you this morning that maybe coming to church and singing the songs and learning the memory verse and turning up to life groups and listening to the sermon and maybe even getting involved in ministries as something physical, as something, as a checkbox, as something you do as a tradition, as something that you do for the sake of doing it, can I present you this morning that actually is pointless? And actually it's not just pointless, but it is an unacceptable offering of worship to a holy God. Because God says, worship me in spirit. Don't check things off your list and hope that I'm okay with it. You're like, Sunday morning, go to church, check. Okay, cool. God's happy now for another couple of days. And then I'll go to life groups on Tuesday. I'll keep him, and that's bonus points at his life groups on Tuesday. Yeah, awesome. And then, just for giggles, I'm going to go to the spring cleaning day on Saturday. And that'll give me extra bonus points, which is I can lie in Sunday morning because I've got bonus points from Saturday. Yay! And God's like, are you kidding me? And then you get mad because you don't get anything out of worship. And you're like, what's going on, God? And God's like, what do you mean what's going on? What's going on with you? Not that God gets that high-pitched. Know who he is. Understand that worship is an offering. It's not something that you receive, it's something that you give. We have to understand that we worship him in spirit. Now, up until this point, everything has been exactly the same. We're going to know who God is. We know it's an offering, and we know we need to worship him in spirit. Everything, the whole process, is exactly the same for everybody. So why is it, when you turn up to a worship service, you've got some people jump up in the house of God down the front, and they're going cray-cray, right? You've got some people at the back, weeping and crying. You've got some people down in the left corner of you were left, my right, just lying on the floor. You've got people just standing still, not moving, just eyes closed. Now, why, if the process is the same, does worship look so different everywhere? Because you can come in this week and maybe we can all be going cray-cray and jumping up in the house of God. Maybe we can all be doing that as well. But next week, it might look totally different. Next week, it might be in a total attitude of staying still. My worship last week is different to my worship this week. Why does it always look so different where we go? And this is where it gets fun. Because this is the second point that Jesus made. Jesus said, you must worship the Father in spirit and in truth. And this is why it looks different. I wonder, was your truth this morning? Is your truth this morning that you've had an amazing week? Has it been like the best week of your life? You've had your promotion and you had a bonus and things are going really, really well and it's been an amazing week and you're coming to church and you're like, yes, Jesus! Woo! You could be. You could be down the front, hands in the air, yay! That could be you with truth this morning. And you could go home and everything could be amazing. You could be having your chicken dinner, you could sit down and get a phone call. And in that one phone call, you can be decimated. Something really tragic has happened. And in that moment, your truth is no longer that you are, yay! Oh, that was loud. In that moment, your truth is now that you are decimated. You're rock bottom now. You've gone from cloud 9 to rock bottom. That's your truth. What's your truth this morning? Because Jesus says, come and worship in truth. Are you hurting this morning? Are you at a point where you physically just can't stand up to sing the songs? Jesus will say to you, that's okay. If that is your truth this morning, you physically can't get out of the chair, that's okay. You can still know who I am, offer me an acceptable worship in spirit and in truth. Have you had an amazing week this morning? Are you on cloud 9 this morning? Do you want to jump up and put your hands in the air and everything's awesome? Jesus will say to you this morning, that's okay. Because that's your truth this morning and you need to worship him in spirit and in truth. Where you're at will also affect how you worship. Now, for any of you who know me, you will know that I am not particularly what you would call an extravagant worshipper. Okay? I'm quite a quiet worshipper. The extent of my extravagance when it comes to worship is closing my eyes and maybe doing this. Okay? This is pretty much the extent of my 9 times out of 10 worship style, if you want to call it that. All right? Because that's who I am. I'm not particularly comfortable with the whole me personally raising my hands. If you are good with that, that's good for you. I'm happy for you. Rock on. But 9 times out of 10, I'm not comfortable with that. And so I worship in the truth that I'm in, which is usually sort of quietly concentrating on the words and just focusing on God, etc. Now I'm going to tell you a secret, okay, which is only between us in this room right now. You don't tell anybody else. This doesn't go outside these walls. There have been times, and some of you know what's coming already. There have been times I've been at different churches, or I've been at a conference or a festival or something, and I am so caught up in the awe of who God is that I'm standing there and I'm singing at the top of my voice and my voice is going hoarse and I'm like, yay, Jesus! It's happened. Don't tell my mother. She doesn't watch YouTube, so we're fine. It's happened. Because in that moment, this is my truth. And in that moment, for me to stand there and worship my 9 times out of 10 is not my truth. And so if I stand there and I don't do what I need to do to worship in my truth, then I'm worshiping in a lie, and my worship is not acceptable to God. Do you get what I'm going with this? Yeah. Where you're at is okay, because God knows where you're at. If you need to stand and just listen to what's going on, because you are so emotionally distraught that you're afraid that if you even try to sing one word, you're just going to burst into tears, that's okay. Just worship in your truth. Now, the reason we started with that question of know who you're worshipping is because when you know who you're worshipping and you know the greatness of who he is, then the things that you are going through, they're not irrelevant. They're still there. They're still true. They're still the truth that you're worshipping in. But the focus is on God. So when you focus on God, it's not that those things aren't there anymore. It's not that you're physically hurting stops. It's not that your emotional distress stops. It's not that your amazing week goes away and you have to be somber. It's just that in the light of who he is, those things almost just don't matter anymore. For that moment when you were face to face, or not literally face to face, that means you're dead, but when you're in the presence of God and you're worshipping God, those things compared to him aren't a big deal. They don't matter so much. because of who you were worshipping. And it's not that they don't matter at all, because they matter to God. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying this morning. God cares about the things that you are going through, which is why he says, so worship me in truth. Because I know what you're going through before you come to me anyway. I know what you're going to go through tomorrow, even though it's today. Know who he is. And know that you bring him an offering of worship, and offer that worship up in spirit and in truth this morning. I'm going to pray. And then I'm going to leave it